Bonamassa, and I'm 39 years old, and in the last 72 hours I've consumed 147 Diet Cokes. I believe my blood aspartame level is in toxic levels. Thank you for coming. Welcome again. Thank you again for coming to the third annual, soon to be the fourth annual we've laughed, we've cried, we've played too loud, we've drank too much.
Never too loud.
Maybe for some of us. Thank you again. What a wonderful lineup of musicians and artists. So, we did this discussion last year, and I thought it would be great if we could do it again. And a lot of people know me as the guy in the black suit and the sunglasses. Like an extra from Men in Black 6, doing it for the money. And so, but the other 22 hours, this is kind of what it's like. I'm wearing some ramshackle set of clothes that I pulled out of a suitcase, a free hat that says Echoplex or something, and I'm a guitar collector, and I've always been a guitar collector ever since I've been a kid, ever since I had $5, and I remember collecting some birthday money and having $85 and being super excited that I was able to go down to the local music store and buy a Crybaby wah-wah pedal. I mean, this is, back when I was 7 years old. These are the kind of things that still excite me to this day, I have $80, I can go buy a wah-wah pedal. So, my friend Norm is back, and for those who don't know Norm Harris, Norm is the proprietor, founder of Norm's Rare Guitars in Los Angeles, California. And Norm basically built the vintage guitar business just by becoming a collector first and then a dealer. And he sold guitars to more famous people than I've forgotten, And some very, very historical guitars that he's found have ended up in some very, very famous hands and have made some real music history on them. So we have a short video that kind of explains a little bit about Norm and his shop and everything. So we're going to play the video right now, and then we're going to call him on stage. So let's roll that wonderful guitar footage, shall we?
It's Tom Petty and Norm hanging out in the store, trying to chisel down those prices.
Ladies and gentlemen, from the Foo Fighters, Mr. Dave Grohl.
Hi, how are you? Nice to meet you. Welcome to Norm's Guitars here.
I got my buddy Adam Levine in here.
What's up?
Room 5.
This place is
Voice.
This is a damn good place.
This is
Do you like
no time customer.
best shit in town?
Everybody in YouTube on our Guitars channel. My buddy Richie's in here playing a 46 G18. This is one of the greatest rhythm guitar player. And plays great leads too. Not even into that. This is Alan King from First Moving Fire. And Chris now, he's coming, he's actually applying for a job here at the store. And I told him you don't really have to dress up like this. But, he insists on always looking dapper. So, my buddy Chris Isaac over here. I got my buddy Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols. Play the second chord. See, punk can be 2 chords, punk can be 1 chord. James Brown made a living off of 1 chord. And back to the day with David Keckner from Anchorman. Norm from Norm's Rare Guitars. I've got an old friend of mine. I've known him since he was a little kid. Jacob Dillon and Len Bonamassa. He's a buddy of ours.
Hi guys, we're here at the legendary Norman's Rare Guitars.
I got 2 of my friends here. I got John Fogg and Brian Bell from Weezer. We got my buddy Paul Stanley over here from Kiss.
here at Norman's Rare Guitars. I'm here with the incredible man, the legend, Mr. Phil Upchurch.
Hey everybody, I'm Dan Estrin and I play in Hoobastank. And this is Nick, and I brought my friend Nick from the All American Rejects over here to Norm's Rare Guitars.
Norm's Rare Guitars. I got the Stereo Joes over here. Both these guys are in Vintage Guitar Magazine. There you go. And we're honored to have both these guys in here. Both these guys really know what to do with the guitar.
And he just is hoping we're gonna buy something so bad.
And this is Dave Motto from Mario Speedwagon. He's my favorite blues player in town. So Fletcher, the real deal Fletcher, just like Holyfield.
My good friend Sergio Vagin from the band Mana.
Hi everybody, I got my good friend over here.
Who I found. Remember my good buddy Tommy Hendrickson. You were Alice Cooper. He's a worldwide traveler, jet setter. What's been going on?
I'm a fan of Norm's guitars for years. I come here and instead of paying my mortgage, I pay Norm for guitars.
We have Andre Segovia V. Over here. My buddy John 5 in here doing a new classical thing. He's given up all heavy metal, all country playing. It's all classical from now on.
All right, look who we got here. James Blunt just came in, Jimmy Jones.
And it's beautiful. We got Johnny Resnick from the Goo Goo Dolls. We got my buddy Tim Schmidt from the Eagles over here.
Our guy Bruno Mars here. I don't get excited when too many people come in the store. But dude, this guy's awesome. It's for immense applause.
Guitar collector, Mr. Guy Pierce is with us here today.
Hey folks, got a guy, found himself here at Norm's, passing through from Australia, from Melbourne, Australia. Just so happened to find a beautiful old playbass in the hands.
We are here with Mike Einziger from Incubus.
The great Robin Ford over here. And Robin and I have dealt together for
Since 1974.
Right, and Johnny Mitchell, right?
That's right.
And Tom Scott.
Yeah.
All through Robbie Robertson, who sent Joni in, Bob Dylan, and loads of other people.
Hello kids.
What's up, guy? You here with Mr. Vince Gill and his beautiful wife and Miss Amy Grant?
This is Nick and Jamie from the Arctic Monkeys, who were in LA recording their coming up 5th album. Is it? The Mercury Prize winners.
This is Dweezil Zappa, a fabulous guitar player, son of Frank Zappa. If you don't recognize him, I'm sure you do. This is Rudy Sardo, the great bass player from Quiet Riot, Ozzy, Whitesnake. All right, we got Ronnie Payne over there, master builder from Fender. We got Dave Motto from REO Speedwagon, Gio Evans from Michael Jackson, Chaka Khan, and the great Ray Parker Jr. Sinbad.
In here, I was going to either buy a house or buy a guitar.
I'm hoping it's going to be the guitar.
I'm a living case.
There you go.
I got a guy that customized. I've seen a couple of cases that you live in.
Well, that explains it a lot, doesn't it? It really becomes an obsession. It becomes an obsession with history. It becomes an addiction in like my case. And I know, a lot of people probably in this room, they know a lot about my guitar collecting habits by my Instagram page that I started, and a few people came to me about 3 or 4 years ago and said, hey, you know what, you need another social media platform. There's just not enough information about Joe Bonamassa flowing 3 times a week through emails and Facebook. We need another social media platform, and we need it right away. And they said, why don't you start an Instagram page? And I said, well, you know what, I'm too old for selfies, And I said, I'll do it if I can do it in my own little way. Basically, 24/7, guitar geek, nerd out, collecting guitars 24/7, I'll do it. And we're very lucky at this point. We've kind of mustered up almost 270,000 loyal nerd followers so far. Thank you. not that that means shit, you know, because Selena Gomez has like 48 million, you know what I mean? So put it in perspective. Anyway,
All about quality.
just when you think you're famous, you know, life on the M list, you know. Anyway, you know, I've done this because it's passion, and I have a little logo. Maybe we could show the slide. And we came up with this Nerdville thing. There it is. And this is as advertised, okay? When you come to my house, we're not all going there, but when you come to my house, people who have been there, my friends who have been there, there is a 10-foot functioning Las Vegas style sign in my driveway that looks exactly like that. And it becomes a house when you move in. It becomes a theme park when you put the sign up. So I live in a theme park. I have Nerdville welcome mats. I have Nerdville wine glasses. I have Nerdville stationery. I have Nerdville coasters. And I have Nerdville shirts that are not for sale, they're only for me. So that's what my house is. It encapsulates a collection and an addiction and just an appreciation for history. And the guy that I look up to the most for this appreciation, and the guy who helps me source a lot of my collection, is a guy named Norm Harris, and we just saw him. So I'd like to bring him out right now. Ladies and gentlemen, Norm Harris. Look at him. Let's put up the other slide. Not a lot of people know that Norm is a world-class Hammond B3 player. And I nicked this photo of you when we did a charity event a couple of weeks ago for a very good cause in Los Angeles, and I don't know if you can see it, but it's you at the organ singing and playing, and not many people know that Norm is a world-class keyboardist, singer, and musician, not just a preeminent guitar dealer.
These people just don't do that too. Hey, I got to thank you, Joe, and you guys all having a great time here. Is responsible for the whole thing, and I just want to say something that I think you guys should know. I mean, you guys are here because you know Joe from his talent, and he's a world-class talent. But I think you guys should know a little bit about Joe as a person. I'm involved with this charity in LA called the Midnight Mission, and it's to serve the homeless, feed, clothe, and get people into the job force, teach them the skill. And Joe, I've got Joe involved in this, and Joe has done several shows to try to promote this, and it's a great charity, and Joe as a person is bigger than he is even as Joe is a talent. So I just want you to know he's a great guy. Thanks about the community.
We did this gig at a gentleman's house a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of our friends and people in the community came out, and we raised, I believe, over $40,000. Yeah. And I think the statistic is it only takes about 92 cents.
96 cents to serve a homeless person a meal. So we served about 40,000 plus meals.
And we always talk about this, it's like one twist or turn in your life, you could be, in that situation. So it was great to be involved, and it was great to be involved in that community. But the hang at the gig, to be a fly on the wall, it was about 4.5 hours of guitar talk, collector talk. It was a whole bunch of collectors, guitar players, music.
It was a love fest.
It was a love fest. Let's go to the other slide. And one of the things you sold me recently is this K&F set. Mm-hmm. And it was a student set made in 1945 by Doc Hoffman and a guy named
Leo Fender. And it was one of the very first instruments, some of the very first instruments that Leo ever made. Leo ran a radio company, radio repair company, and he eventually started building amplifiers and these lap steels, which are Hawaiian, but a lot of the blues guys use them as well,
Yes.
and then eventually to guitars.
Yeah, and Leo built all this stuff out of his radio shop, and I think by 1947, he had told Doc Kaufman that his services were no longer needed, and he started Fender musical instruments. And, you know, the one thing about, like, you know, everybody knows me, I play a Les Paul, and like, if you saw me last night, I'll play a Fender Stratocaster or a Gibson 335. I hope you all were there at the show last night. So the question is like, why would somebody like me who basically plays a Gibson or a Fender and plays blues rock for a living, why would I collect something like these lap steels when, you know, I don't play Hawaiian music, I'm not a very good slide player, you don't, you know.
Bullshit.
I've been on here for 17 minutes and the audience is already hostile. So, you know, when I purchased the set from you, it was always something that I had seen in books. I wanted an early set, and you happen to have in your stash a perfect set. I mean, a 1945 first-year student model with the covers, with the amp. And by the way, the little amp that you can see, the little gray amp, I don't know, by the way, I took these photos with my cell phone, okay? I'm like, you know, I'm not a pro photographer. The little amp, the little gray amp, there is not a single knob on it. It is just a jack and a couple of tubes, and it just amplifies this lap steel, and it's not very loud. People didn't play as loud as we play now, back in those days, you know? But to me, I love that pair is because it's history, you know, and it's functioning art, it's also, it's history, and it's Americana. And it's something that every screw, tube, filament, capacitor, everything was built in America, and pretty much built in Los Angeles County at the time, because he would just source locally, and that's how he started this empire that changed music.
And everything you see people playing Fender guitars, that all came from that. And by the way, Joe is a very sick young man. He loves this stuff. He's really into it. And you're talking about a hostile audience. There's a lady that keeps following me around on this cruise, a very pretty blonde lady, and she keeps saying, "Don't sell Joe any more guitars."
That would be my mother. You know, my parents came to my house when I set up the house, and you know, my father had a guitar shop and started me on this journey a long time ago. And my mother always tolerated this kind of behavior until I became a functioning adult. And then once I became an adult, and I didn't have to explain every guitar purchase to my mom or run it by her. And she came to the house and she saw about 250 amps well displayed out in the living room. She saw another couple hundred guitars on display, very nicely done. It's not a hoarding situation. And my father goes, "Wow, that's really cool." And my mother just goes simply, "Oh dear."
I asked his parents if they'd gone and stayed at Joe's house, and the only thing they could say is no room.
That's right. That's right. And let's go to the next slide, shall we? Let's see what we got here. Now, speaking of Fender, you know, I'm a Gibson guy, but you know, I've got a few decent guitars. These are some of the first custom color, solid color Stratocasters ever made. The one on the wall will be my right, your left, is a guitar that was made for a guy named Howard Reed of Gene Vincent and the Blue Caps. And the other one, the gold one, I'm sorry about the blurry photo, and this black blob in the middle is a Fender Bandmaster. That was made for Eldon Shamblin of Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys. And I bought these guitars because I saw them in books. And as instruments, they are, let's just say, crude, well-worn, and not particularly good. You wouldn't see them on stage, but as history, they really, you know, become like these iconic guitars that, you know, like Eldon would go to Leo and like, I want a gold Strat, so here's a gold Strat. So they would go down to the hardware store, buy some gold paint, and paint a Strat again. Want a black guitar? Go down to the hardware store. And it wasn't this, like, you know, as it is now, where, you know, this massive factories. These were just 5, 10 people in a factory building guitars.
Everything now is a CNC machine. It's something that's programmed with a computer, and there's some good things about it, and then there's some bad things about it. When instruments don't have their own personality, and back in the day, they were hand-shaped by these individuals, voiced, you know, for tone. So every one of these guitars has a separate personality.
Yeah, and, you know, so talk a little bit about, like, because, you know, you found a lot of historically significant Fender guitars in Southern California because they were built 50 miles from your store.
Right.
And talk about some of the more historical ones that you found, like either from artists or you know, maybe just stuff that doesn't exist. Maybe like a pair of white super amps that may have been found and that may now be in Nerdville, you know?
Right. Well, there was a guy named Porky Freeman who was a designer for Fender. And somehow or other, I got this idea from my wife, Marlene. She said, why don't you go down to the Musicians Union and get the handbook and just start calling everybody in there and just saying, you know, do you have any old guitars for sale? And most of the time people hung up on me and told me where I could put it and all that. But every once in a while I got a call. You know, somebody would answer the call and would say, yeah, I have some stuff for sale. So I got a hold of this guy. I bought several instruments from him. And Joe bought one of these this one amplifier. I said it was the only one in the world.
That's right.
And the next time he came to my warehouse, there was another one. So my memory, you know, I'm 68 years old, so you can't hold me to everything.
Well, you know, I bought the Porgy Freeman amp, and because technically the amplifier doesn't exist. It was never in the catalog. It was just a one-off for an employee.
Right.
And I had the amp, I would say, for about a year. And it was great. I would always tell people that it's the only one in the world, you know, look at me, how about that, baby, you know? And everybody, you know, like either give me the blank stare and like, so what, or wow, that's cool. And happened to be out in the warehouse, and we tripped and fell over this Fender amp with a brown cover, and it looked like a twin, and your guy Mark takes the cover off, and lo and behold, the second white super, to the point I was like, I was like, Norm, I thought the Porgy Freeman was the only one. He was like, guess there's another one.
Well,
So what would you do in that situation?
it occurred to me, there was another guy who was typing Leo Fender. His name was Rome Johnson, and he played with the Sons of the Pioneers. And a lot of times these famous groups, they would go to Leo and they would say, could you make me something a little bit different? You know, so that I have something a little unique.
Well, here's another slide that we can put up, and again, I rated my phone. This is a Fender Showman. Now, this would be a pro rig. The Fender Jazzmaster, not the Stratocaster, not the Telecaster. That was the flagship.
That was the top of the line.
That was the most expensive Fender guitar, and that amplifier, the Showman, was the most expensive. And that would have been if you were a pro band on the road, touring, and you know, like, ever see that movie, that thing, the thing you do, or the one with Tom Hanks? One of the best continuity, vintage correct. I'm sure you were involved with it.
I was.
And you know, the gear was period correct. The stuff was right. It would have been like if you went back in the '60s and saw the show. And you know, so tell people like the difference between like the pro stuff, the value of something like that, or like a practice amp, or like a student model. How do those differentiate as far as the world of collecting?
Well, you know, a lot of the young people as they're first starting, they can't really afford the top end pro gear. Of course, you know, a pro guitar back in the day might be $300, where the student guitar was $170 or something like that, and that was a lot of difference, you know, to a lot of the people.
And you know, I have guitars that have the original receipts, some of them, and you look at the prices. I have a double neck. I a blonde double neck. That the original receipts in the case, and it was $460 in 1959. That was a lot of money. That was about $6,000, $7,000 back then. So the stuff, even though it seems cheap by comparison, like you could buy a Fender Strat for $300. In 1960, that was like spending $3,000 on a guitar. Now, it wasn't until the 70s that vintage guitars they started to take off, but they were still cheap, they were by comparison.
Well, Joe uses, and he last night he used, and the first night he used, a 1959 Sunburst Les Paul. Now, yes, and a lot of you folks don't know this, but back in the day they were $283. Now that guitar is worth, a terrible example is $100,000. And a great example is $500,000. He was out there last year playing a guitar like this in the rain because he loves you guys and he wanted to hear his best foot forward. I said, are you crazy? He said, this is for the fans. So, that's
I've taken these things out. I mean, listen, I'm not going to put a historically significant guitar in harm's way. If it really started raining, I would have had to bail on it. But a few drops of wood, it's not going to turn back into a tree again. And a few drops of water on it, it's not going to. I bought this guitar. This was a guitar I purchased about 7 years ago. I call it Magellan. And the reason why I call it Magellan is when I first got it, I was so scared to own it. And the fellow I got it from said, hey, listen, if you're going to, if I'm going to let you pay this thing off on time, you need to play it every show. And I want you to take it on a world tour. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do that. So I put it in a black case and I take it through America. And I get to Australia. And what I didn't realize is that in Australia, the flying with guitar rules is, let's just say, not friendly to our kind of people. And I remember having to fight my way through this tour of Australia to get the guitar on the plane because you just don't hand over a $200,000 instrument to baggage claim. And they said, it's like, they humor you and, well, just give it to us and we'll take extra special care. And and they placate you, and they come in with that fake smile, and that one lady did it to me, and she was like, we're going to take really good care of your guitar, and I said, why are you turning this airport into an airport of fucking lies? Anyway, I did say that to her. Anyway, so this was Magellan, and I got it through, and what I ended up having to do is buy seats for it. So if you ever see like some weird-looking dude in an Echoplex hat with a big guitar case next to him, that's me. And I tell you what, you see some weird stuff traveling the world, but nothing compares to when you strap a guitar into a coach seat, middle seat coach. People start looking at you like you're absolutely mental, and it's great because it keeps people from talking to you on the plane.
To say something too, that this neuroses of Joe's, he comes by this naturally because his dad had a music store in upstate New York, so he's been through the whole thing. And by the way, he's got his mom, his dad, and his brother-in-law on this cruise.
That's right.
It's a family thing. I have my brother, who is 85 years old, his new wife Maria. I have my 3 nephews, their other halves, the best. And so it started a family reunion. I hope you guys, next year, you think about doing the same thing.
Well, Norm, you were telling me a story about your brother, and he's a very kind soul. Right. And some of the clientele that walks into the store, I mean, they're rock and roll people. They're not dressed up in their Sunday best all the time. Right. It's a guitar shop. This is kind of assumed behavior. Tell the folks how your brother generously wanted to
help someone. Yeah. He's a really good guy, very successful businessman, very kind, and he loves music, but he doesn't know a lot of the contemporary artists. So he was in the store, and Tom Petty happened to be in the store. And Tom was wearing fatigues, with like some ripped, things in the pants, and, it was a little funky on the outfit. And my brother Manny leaned over to me and kind of went, "Should I give him a couple bucks?" I love that story.
Do you think Tom would take the money?
He might have.
Fair enough. Speaking of family, Norma's family has become family over the last 10 years, and we had, we've been on this boat for 3-4 days, and all we do is kind of talk, my mom and dad and stuff like that. And we were sitting yesterday outside enjoying the sun, and my father was involved, and we were sharing stories of stuff. And I said, you know what? Not a lot of opportunities to get my father on stage, because he's very, very expensive, by the way. I've had to pay him $75,000 for this personal appearance.
I was Asian. I was the one who suggested it.
He had to be choppered in. It was a whole thing. It's really drag. So I thought it'd be cool to bring up my father to give a parental perspective and maybe an intervention and just see what his take is on all of the collecting, being a dealer himself, and share some early stories. Dad, we want to come out here welcome Len Bonamassa, father of me and my sister Lindsay. Well, my dad and I, we used to go out and we used to respond to ads in local newspapers like everybody else, and we used to buy guitars for fun. And my dad started collecting and playing. He's a musician and got me into it. So Dad, what do you think, just overall, give them your thumbnail opinion of what I'm doing in California at the moment as far as a collector. What do you think? Give it, and don't mince words.
There isn't a psychologist in the country that has figured out any type of help for this disease. There is no cure. If anybody's got one, please help my son.
That's right.
Oh, and look who's talking. There's going to be no intervention from this guy, I can tell you that.
All right, I'm guilty.
So Dad, what we used to do, and not to put Mom on the spot, is because there was always, we're a middle-class family, so we would buy and sell guitars to afford other guitars, because we loved it all. And what we used to do is we used to hide gear from Mom.
Which wasn't easy.
But when I had developed in my little room, I had a closet, and I took the doors off the closet, and I built an amp wall in front of the closet. And this was stuff that she knew that I owned.
Yes.
And what she didn't know was a whole other row of stuff that she didn't know that I owned
behind the secret wall.
Exactly.
It was very difficult to hide anything from Mom. And I think the key was, once you get past number 12, it gets confusing if you're keeping track of exactly what make and model and finishes on the instruments. And I got to the point where my poor wife just blew up the white top.
And then she said, "Why don't you start a store?" And you did.
Yes, absolutely. This was around 1997. We first started collecting a few guitars in the beginning, probably around 1993, 94. And we amassed around 35 guitars. And I had a good friend of mine from Connecticut that kind of helped us out. Says you should do some vintage guitar shows. There's some big ones in your area. There was one in Philadelphia. It was a huge show, but you need to keep turning them over. There's tons of buyers there, and so we did our first show. We took all the guitars in a Ford Explorer. We ran 35 guitars in cases, and we bought a booth and brought the guitars down. Got to meet all the players and major dealers and buyers, and so we had 35 guitars standing that weekend. By Sunday, we had 0 guitars left. I came home, this is no lie.
Don't applaud that, that's not a good thing.
Well, anyways, for my wife it was a good thing. I came home with a paper bag full of cash. I dumped it on the table. I said, we had no problems buying more guitars.
Is this a bad time to bring up that the IRS wants to see you backstage and have you fill out some paperwork? Anyway, you know, and Norm, you started your store what year?
I started the store in '75, but I was actually buying and selling vintage guitars since the late '60s, since about '67 in Miami.
And you started in Miami?
Yeah, I came out to California in '75 with actually 1970 with my band, and trying to make it big, but I kind of went to Plan B, and we opened the store in '75.
Right, and you know, last year we showed the photo of you selling the guitars to George Harrison, and that would have been, what, 1975 as well, maybe?
It was probably a little before that, you know. So a friend of mine, I would have to buy and sell them and consign them to other stores. There was a store in West Hollywood that his buddy of mine owned it, and he said to me, I need you to come down here right now. I've got somebody very special who's coming to buy a guitar. And it turned out that George had a Les Paul from the late 50s that was given to him by Eric Clapton. It got stolen from him and was sold to a store in Hollywood, who in turn sold it to a guy who lived in Mexico. And they got a hold of the guy, and the guy said, listen, I'd be happy to have George have his guitar back, but I want to replace it with another 50s Les Paul. So he went to my friend's store, and my friend said, well, there's only one guy I know who's got 50s Les Pauls. So they called me. I ran over to the store. There was nobody in there. I said, what's going on? He said, George Harrison. You know, I said, get out of here. He says, no, he's getting a slice of pizza next door. And with that, George and Mal Evans, Deal's road manager, come walking in. And at the time, I took him back to my apartment in Sherman Oaks. My wife, Marlene, was still there in her bathroom. And I said, George Harrison's coming in. And she said, yeah.
Right.
And following, you know. So George came in, bought the guitar, and we were able to trade to get his guitar back. And that's his famous guitar, Lucy.
That's right, the red one that he got from Rick Derringer, I think.
Originally it was Rick's, but Clapton gave it to him.
That's right. And I remember when we decided to do the guitar shop, you know, I would be like my father's helper at the guitar shows, and I'd have a little bit of money. And how would you rate me, Dad, as an employee at Bank Place Guitar and at Bonamassa's Guitars? Was I a good employee? Did I show up on time? Did I clean up the store? Because you used to smoke cigars in the store, which was that was a classic, by the way.
Joe, just a model employee.
That's right, thank you.
Let me elaborate on that a little bit further. When Joe would go out on tour, we would talk to each other once, twice a week. Dad, what'd you get in the store? What'd you get in? And every now and then a beautiful, cool vintage guitar would show. I gotta have it. I gotta have it. Okay. Gave it to him when I had into it, sent it out. But I was the one who was really excited about the guitar because I have a passion for these instruments. And I was so excited, I'd be the first to call him up. You wouldn't believe what I just got in the store. You're gonna love it. And I wanted really him to have these instruments because I know how much he loved them also. You know, vintage guitars, I mean, it's the addiction, the attraction is not only are they aesthetically beautiful, but they have a dual purpose. Not only, and they sound great. They're the best made instruments back in that era. It's just, they're so much fun, you know. And
there's something about an old guitar that makes
the feel,
Well, it's also, it makes a seemingly normal, rational, intelligent individual. We have friends like me.
I don't know anybody rational.
Yeah, it makes normal, rational, intelligent people say to themselves internally going, I'm willing to go without food, clothing, and shelter for the next 6 months to own this thing. And I've seen it happen. I've seen it, like, when I used to live in New York City, I used to live on a steady diet of peanut butter and jelly and ramen noodles, okay? That's all I could afford. But for some reason, it would be a no-brainer for me to go buy a guitar that I couldn't afford just because Dad got it in the shop or you know, and it's turned into this kind of addiction, you know, and for me, it's going to be a museum. I'm not going to sell it off. You're never going to see it's going to be preserved for somebody to enjoy after I'm done, because my idea is, why hoard it? That's why I share it with everybody. I'm not flaunting it, go look what I got. I share it with people because I want people to understand how cool things used to be, you know what I mean? Like, if you had a 59 Les Paul and a 59 Cadillac, you're going, that's pretty cool. And we used to do that, you know? It's like not like an 89 Ford Taurus and, you know, a Casio keyboard. I mean, like, what happened in 30 years, you know? It's like really wacky.
We did a couple things right here in America.
We did, and there was a golden era in the late 50s. Let's go to another slide while we're here. This is a bass that you sold me. It's a Fiesta Red P bass that, I'm not a bass player, but I'm a horrible bass player. Have you ever heard me play bass? It's like I just solo.
Don't believe it.
I'm a horrible bass player. And I bought the bass because I had the other two colors. I had this Stratocaster and this Jaguar. And the great thing about a Fender bass is all those classic James Jamerson records. And you're a big bass collector. So talk about like the appeal of like the bass versus the guitar, because it's the same.
Well, you know, originally all these guys were using these upright basses, and as music got louder, people had to have something that wouldn't feed back, and they wouldn't have to deal with volume issues. So they started doing these solid body basses. And the Fender bass is really articulate well, where you can really hear what note is being played.
Right.
And it just became the bass of choice. He was talking about James Jamerson. James Jamerson was the guy who played all the Motown tunes. You know, all of the tunes that you guys loved back in the day, that was James Jamerson. Another guy was Duck Dunn, who played all the Stax tunes, you know, which is Midnight Hour,
yeah.
You know, all the Otis Redding tunes and all that kind of stuff that you guys really dig. There were like two guys playing on a lot of those tracks.
And Leo invented the P bass, and in that form in 1957, and it hasn't changed. I mean, it's like an industry standard. Michael Rhodes, world's greatest bass player. Yeah. Okay. Michael Rhodes plays the Fender P bass.
By the way, it's a precision.
A precision
it's known as a P bass to all the people that have a problem. You know?
And you know that design hasn't changed in 50 some odd years. You know. Let's go to the next slide. There's some interesting. The guitar in the middle you sold me, which is a 1965 candy apple red Fender 12-string. Now these things look really wacky. They have split pickups. It's called a Fender Electric 12. I told my father that I had a collection of Fender Electric 12s, and he goes, "Why?"
I'm a Rickenbacker guy.
You know, that's what I call that. I call this photo 36 strings of ambiguous intonation, because these things are hard to tune. But on this particular guitar, there was one song that was recorded with it that cannot be played in music stores ever again. And it was called Stairway to Heaven. And that, if you ever wondered what the guitar was on Stairway to Heaven, the 12-string part, I'm not going to bore you by playing it because it doesn't need to be played again. It was a Fender Electric 12. And that's the sound that you hear on that Led Zeppelin recording, and that's why they're popular today, is because of the Jimmy Page Association.
Well, a lot of the British groups kind of discovered the electric 12-string.
Right.
And it came also from the Byrds, which was not a British group, but all of a sudden the Beatles had to have them, and on and on and on. And it really made these 12 strings become prominent.
Yeah, and you know, like a lot of the kind of the hippie music and that stuff that was coming out of the 60s, and everybody had an electric 12. I mean, Gibson made an electric 12. And let me tell you something, when you tune up, I just did a Black Country Communion album, and we got the band back together, and one of the songs required an electric 12-string, and I brought the Candy Apple Red, and unfortunately the song was in a half step down, so you had to tune it a half step down. So 3.5 hours later, I'm still trying to tune this thing a half step down. But it was a unique sound that it just takes you back to that time. I mean, you plug one of these old instruments into an old amp, those sounds that you hear, that you heard on record in your head, that's what it is. You don't need a pedal, you don't need any of this, you don't need an iPad, you don't need anything. Just, plug it in and go. Let's go to the next slide. This is what happens when you buy one blonde guitar. And by the way, this is not all of them. There's 3 more ES5s. There's a few other.
There's no hope of an intervention.
No. And what this is, these are natural color Gibson ES models. There's a 350. There's 2 ES345s. One I showed you, we found in a barn, and then a blonde dot neck. Why are these guitars so collected? Because in some respects I get it, and in some respects I just look at those and I go, man, they just forgot to paint them.
Well, the thing is that those blonde guitars, they couldn't really shade with paint to kind of cover imperfections, so they had to use the best wood on the blonde guitar. So generally, even when they were new, they were more expensive. Now, these things are astronomical, and a lot of the jazz guitars, there's guitars like the T-Bone Walker guitar, he was famous for playing the ES5, and these blonde 335s and 345s, they're extremely rare.
They're like one of 29. And, speaking of extremely rare, to reference like one of the best guitar safaris that I've ever been on, my father was involved, and it was when we pulled out the Marshall stacks in 2011. And my father was there, and we went to this guy's house, and we ended up in the basement in front of these 2 gigantic, mid-condition 1969 Marshall stacks. And I usually have a pretty good poker face. I bought a guitar or 2 in my day. And I am freaking out, right?
I've never seen a look on his face at this time. Time stood still. He was starstruck. He's just looking up at these 2 mid-1968 Marshall stacks that were time capsules. And Joe. What do you think?
Finally,
It makes negotiations pretty difficult.
Yeah, and I'm like looking at it, and finally my dad's like, dude, like we gotta pay them and get out of here. And my dad goes, I'll distract the old lady. You pay them now, right? And the guy's mother was there, right? And we're in his mother's basement. And she had like a bottle of, the Italian bottle of wine, those big thing, those big 6-gallon bottle of Chianti. And the conversation got like a little bit weirder as it went, as the wine flowed. At one point I remember these 2 guys arguing over the fact that Eddie Van Halen stole the riff from You Got Me from one of his brothers. I'm going, it's a Kinks song. It's all Ray Davies. You guys don't know what you're talking about. Pay the man. Let's go. But those stories, and I'm sure you have, stories like that where you go, you'll remember the going, to these people's houses and buying these guitars for the rest of your life. You had a very scary one in East Los Angeles one time. Tell the folks about the...
I had a guy, I ran an ad the other times, too much money paid for old guitars. This guy called me, and he had a Stratocaster for sale, and I got the serial number and all that, and he told me that it was in nice shape, and that his dad got it for him when he was a young man. And I had to go down to like a really bad gang area to get this guitar. And by the way, before I went down there, I said, by the way, what color is the guitar? And he said, it's kind of a purple, which Joe knows what that means. There's
burgundy mist?
Color burgundy mist, which is really rare, really valuable. And I started shaking, I got in my car and I went down there. By the time I got there, the guy was drunk as hell. And on his dining room table was the guitar, which was beautiful, and a giant machete right next to it. And he's like asking me if I would like to have a drink. And basically, I used my wife Marlene as an excuse. I said, she's making dinner. If I don't get home, I'm in big trouble. I want it out of there so quick. And sometimes it's a good idea to just pay it, make your deal, and get the hell out before something bad happens.
I feel like you want to go like, can I give you $20 for the machete just to get it out of the guy's house? Let's go to the next slide. By the way, I just realized, see those Marshall stacks? That's the Marshall stacks that we're talking about.
Those are the ones.
And that's my museum room part of it. That's 50 mint tweed amps. That's the entire set. That took me 7 years to collect. Don't even ask, because it's just don't even ask. And by the way, I'm very protective of the tweed amps. I clean the house myself. I clean around them. I'm very, very protective of the tweed amps. It's a neurosis. Let's go to the next slide. Now, the other stuff I collect, and some fun stuff, is this memorabilia. And, you know, I've been guilty of watching an American Pickers marathon here or there. And, you know, everybody, because, you know, just because you got a Haagen-Dazs sign doesn't mean you got $1 million bucks, you know. And what these signs represent these are point of purchase signs. And what they were, they would like Vox or Fender, and, you know, Vox or Fender would send these to music stores. So out of the thousands of guitars that they would sell, the store would need one sign. And there's one sign in particular that has a story in this photo that's special to me. And it's this one right there. See the Fender sign that's a little bit more white? That sign hung at Gruen Guitars for years. And every time I would walk into Gruen's and I would either buy something, I would get no discount, and I would inquire about the sign, and it was an absolute stonewall. And I said, well, okay, fine. And I would ask, and I would ask, and I would ask. And finally, last year, there was a situation that came up where I purchased the guitar from an original owner. It was one of these Sunburst guitars. And again, there was no discount. And I finally, I think just because of my age and experience, and maybe I was just hungover or something, and I was in a bad mood, and I said, I'm not buying the guitar until you cut that fucking sign off the wall, and I want the sign. And they're like, they started laughing, like, and I go, I'm serious. And they go, you're gonna walk away on the guitar if you don't get the sign. I go, yes, I am that childish. So, that sign right there, I'm particularly proud of. It is the most expensive sign in the world. Because I figure I got the guitar for free, and I paid 6 figures for that sign.
About collecting bubbles.
You know what? Tell them about your kitchen. I mean, this is where you really know he's got a problem.
Yeah, well, okay. I'll explain the kitchen. And by the way, this is one more slide, and then we're almost done. The next slide. Let's go to the next slide. This is what happens when FedEx breaks one of your signs. And we were talking about this the other day. Like, you know how you want an insured value, declared value, you pay for the insurance. They're not going to pay you. I think they offered me like $6 and a free envelope, you know. And so my kitchen, just to sum up, and we'll wrap this up in the next day. I know you guys got to want to see some shows. My kitchen is pretty honest at the moment. We're redoing the kitchen, but because of the theme of the house, I've decided that the kitchen cabinets aren't going to be like maple veneer. They're not going to be, you know, mahogany, whatever you would see in a normal kitchen. I've decided to do Carina wood cabinets like a flying V. And to have them painted like my Carina flying V that I bought from Norm. And the drawer handles, as opposed to just a standardized drawer handle, we've devised this this invention, I fancy myself an inventor, that we're going to use these pieces from the Les Paul as drawer handles.
Yeah.
And so what I figured, after I have invested in the kitchen and finish it, I figured that at that point in time, the house will be worth about $3.50 because it won't be worth anything to anybody. It will be the nerdiest place on earth. And I'll be happy. I can die happy. So.
This is no drugs, no alcohol.
Anyway, I just want to thank everybody. Once again, Norm, it's been a pleasure having you on the cruise. A legendary shop. By the way, if you're in Los Angeles, California, you have to go see Norm's Rare Guitars. By the way, it's becoming a pilgrimage because people come to your store from all over the world, and it's great.
An institution, kind of institution.
And Norm always closes for Christmas, through the holidays, and I don't think you open up at like January 2nd. And it was so funny because there's a bunch of our friends that, because the store closes for 10 days, 2 weeks, we were all there at like 11 o'clock, the day it reopened. We were all he was like, what are you doing? I was like, well, Norm's is back. It's become like this clubhouse, and we met a lot of great friends. And, it's one of the things that I cherish in life is my relationships with people and history. And I'd like to thank you for being part of all that and being part of the family. And I'd like to thank Dad for being such a good sport up here and being kind to me and understanding as a parent, because when you go to your parents and say, hey, listen, I want to be a professional musician, generally they're going to go, oh my God, we're going to have to pay his bills for the rest of his life.
Before I go, I'd like to say, Joe, you made me the proudest father.
This is the ultimate. You're out at sea, eating yourself to death and watching some of the greatest music in the world under the stars. How about that?
Thank you guys for coming. I know people have been here every year, and we'll do this again next year. We'll talk about the guitar safaris, and we'll see you guys on the road. I know you guys have come from all over the world, and enjoy the music. It's our last day, and try not to drink too much tonight because that 9:30 a.m. comes real early, and I'm a people watcher by nature, and last year I watched people like coming out of the boat, and it was just like, I think they were up a little bit too late, and they just had this kind of, oh my God, I should have went to bed early tonight. So be careful and stay safe and enjoy the music. Thank you, Norm. Thank you, Dad. Thanks, Mom. And